So how long does the egg donation process take? If you've thought about doing the egg donor process, you've probably asked yourself this question. My name is Corlandos Scott, and I help people walk through the egg donation process every day as an assisted reproduction attorney. And I'd love to answer that question for you. Stay tuned. So in order to answer the question, how long does the process take? We first have to look at which type of process are you going through. So in this video, we're going to talk about the process. We'll look at a frozen egg cycle or an egg cycle with a bank or a clinic, and we'll also look at going through the egg donation process with the help of a donor agency. Let's jump right in. If you're looking at going through what we call a frozen egg donation, and those are eggs that have already been donated and are stored with an egg bank or a clinic, then really the process is almost as immediate as getting through the clinic or the bank's paperwork and process. But the journey to getting those eggs to the egg bank is pretty much the same as if you were working with an agency. So let's walk through the steps. The first thing that's going to happen is the donor has to go in and sign up with the egg bank or the clinic. They're going to want to know things about her history, her family history, her medical history, and of course her genetic history. Then we begin the screening process for the donor. So there's three real categories of screening processes. There's going to be the medical screening or the fertility screening process. There's going to be the genetic screening process and also a psychological evaluation, so the psychological screening process. The medical screening process is really the physical exam for the donor to see if she's physically capable of doing the process and being a qualified donor. You're going to do things like check hormone levels, do an ultrasound, and also a pelvic examination. The purpose of the genetic screening process is to make sure that we're aware of any hereditary traits that may pose a danger to the potential recipients who want to take custody of the eggs. We want to make sure that we know about any genetic abnormalities that the donor may or may not carry. And last but not least, we do a psychological screening or evaluation of the donor. And I've had a lot of intended parent clients, or recipient clients rather, that want to skip over this phase. They say, I don't want to pay for that screening, but it is vitally important. In another video, we talked about whether a donor has the right to be a legal parent. If you haven't seen that video, make sure to subscribe below and go check out that video. But parents ask the question, why do we need a psychological evaluation? Well, one of the questions that is explored and the topics that's explored in that psych eval is how the donor feels about the process of releasing her genetic material into the hands of another and that person growing their family through her donation. Are they okay with that? Do they understand the mental and the psychological and emotional repercussions of that? Are they emotionally and mentally fit to go through the process on the physical side of things? Can they handle the pressures? Are they going to be able to abide by the terms that the doctor sets? We want to make sure that we have a mental health professional who's qualified in going through and sussing through these details, talk to the donor and examine or evaluate her to make sure that there are no things left up to chance. So after the donor's been screened with the clinic, the next thing they're going to do is jump into the med start process. This process, you can really think about it in two phases. First is the stimulation phase. So the donor is going to be taking stimulating medications to stimulate her follicles to hopefully be prepared to produce the mass quantity of eggs that they hope to go in and retrieve. The next step is the actual retrieval. So when the time is right and the donor has taken her trigger shot, the doctor monitors her and then goes in and does the actual aspiration or retrieval. You'll hear it referred to as a retrieval or aspiration. But in any event, the doctor goes in and retrieves the eggs to store and to freeze. After that, as far as the clinic or the egg bank is concerned, the process is over. The eggs are retrieved, they're in cryopreservation, and they're ready for you, the recipient or intended parent, to walk into the clinic to explore your options. However, most of the intended parents that I work with, they choose to go through an agency. So what is an agency? A donor agency is simply a company that matches hopeful parents with donors who are willing to donate their eggs. The process of working with a donor agency is very similar to working with an egg bank or a clinic, but there are a couple tweaks that you definitely want to know about. Even when you're working with an agency, we're still going to do the preliminary steps. We're going to take that application. We're going to learn about the family background of the donor, and we're going to actually do an intake process where sometimes agencies will even do background checks on the donors. We want to learn about her education, we want to learn about her family history, and we want to make sure that she knows what she's signing up for. After that comes the agency's specific screening process. Now, there's no universal guideline for what donors agencies will or will not accept, but most donor agencies do have their own guidelines that they abide by. So once the donor applies, that agency is going to work through that application, going to look at her medical history, also going to look at maybe some preliminary background checks and determine whether that donor is right to go onto their database. Now, here's where you want to make sure you know of a couple nuances. Some agencies decide to pre-screen their donors medically. Most agencies don't pre-screen their donors. So you want to know when you're working with an agency or you're considering an agency whether or not they pre-screen their donors medically. Most times, as I said, that's going to come after you match with the donor. So once you've engaged an agency, you've matched with a potential donor, then we want her to get medically screened to see if she's going to be physically and medically fit to undertake the process. Now, we won't dig deeply into this because we've already talked about it when we spoke about clinics. The process is really the same. You're going to have a physical examination, you're going to also do some genetic screening, and you'll also want to do a psychological evaluation on the donor. Now, once all that is done, the medical facility issues what we call medical clearance back to the agency. That's a letter or that's information that tells the agency, hey, we're clear on this end, she's passed all of her screening, she's a go, and you can start the legal process. That's where someone like me comes in. Once I receive word that your agency has received a medical clearance letter from the clinic, we then start drafting that egg donor contract. Now, here's another pro tip. You don't want to start drafting the legal contract between you and the donor before you get medical clearance. The reason for that is, God forbid that your donor fail her clearance or her medical screening process. Well, then you've paid money to an attorney to draft it and the donor's attorney to review it. So just hold off. I know everyone wants this process to be over yesterday, but just hold off on engaging and paying your attorney to start that work until you get the medical clearance. We all want to know about timeline, right? The question was, how long does this process take anyway? Well, like I said, if you're working with a clinic, after they've gone through the process, the eggs are already cryopreserved. So when you walk in the clinic, it's simply a matter of you going through their process to obtain custody of the eggs. Now, when you're going through the agency process where you're matching with a donor, it can be anywhere between a matter of weeks and maybe sometimes days to a matter of months, depending on whether the donor you want to work with is already doing a cycle with another couple, or is traveling and can't do it right now, or whether she is able to schedule her appointments in a timely manner. It all really depends. As far as the egg donation process itself, after the legal process is finished, we issue what we call a legal clearance letter back to the doctor and say, doctor, there's a legal contract between these two parties that allows this woman to donate her eggs to this recipient or recipients. Once the doctor has that, they start her on her injectable medications. Now, that process I've seen take anywhere between 10 days to 3 weeks. On the egg donor side of things, you're going to want to make sure that you're clear on how often she's going to be monitored, because you want to make sure that she's checking in and being monitored by the doctor so that they know exactly how far along she is and when to schedule that retrieval process. Now, the retrieval itself is a pretty quick process. It's probably between 20 to 40 minutes max. After that, the donor needs some time to rest, but all in all, I think you should prepare yourself for at least a 2 to 3 month process from the time you start your Google search for an agency until the time that you have the eggs in your custody. So now you have a better picture of how long you should expect the donor process to work for you, depending on which route you take. Well, listen, if you're thinking about the donor process, you may also be thinking about the surrogacy process. And if you are, I have something for you. click the link below and it'll take you to my training called Stress-Free Surrogacy, where I walk you through the surrogacy process. I tell you about my clients that have previously gone through the process, roadblocks that I've helped them work through, and ways that you can avoid the pitfalls and the road bumps and all those things that could possibly slow you down. So click the link below and get that free training, and you'll be one step closer to growing the family that you deserve.